Good afternoon. Spent the morning getting some feed to the pigs. And that's fun, except those 50-pound bags, they seem to get heavier each year. It's 60 something right now. And I'm overdressed. I'm wearing a sweatshirt. I really shouldn't be. But it's got an amazing breeze. I don't know what it is, but it feels good. So, what's on our mind? I want to go back to the Supreme Court case. I've had a couple more thoughts about it. I don't understand anyone who says the decision was good in any way, except in the sense that we escaped absolute annihilation by the crazy justices and the ambiguity of Roberts, the chief judge. We only have 3 judges on the court who understand that a precedent that allows a woman to have an abortion for 24 weeks bars a new law that says she may only have an abortion in the first 6 weeks if somehow or other she notices that there's a heartbeat within her. And women, turn to your men and tell them that you don't know anything at 6 weeks in most cases. And in fact, because I said something about this on Twitter, a whole bunch of women explained how which children they had and when they knew, and pretty late in their pregnancy in many cases. So, but Texas knows that. That's why they're doing this. And this is a march in Texas's mind, and the alt-right and the Christian freaks who would impose upon us their religious fictions, if you will. And a religious fiction that's a meditation is one thing, but one that you would impose on somebody else who's not of your faith or doesn't respect that doctrine, it seems to me is a failure of separation of church and state. But that said, there are those who want to say that the moment of conception, that egg that has been fertilized, is a person. And I'm not saying this just out of the blue. When I was on the Hill and was handling matters on the Judiciary Committee as a special counsel, they actually proposed a bill that would make a fertilized egg a person. So what are we looking at here? Well, if you remember Gore against Bush, the Supreme Court basically decided a presidential election when they had no business doing so, and they had no authority to do so. But that didn't stop them. And then in the opinion, they wrote that this opinion has no precedential effect for any other opinion. It's like they knew that this was wrong. And so now we're in a situation in which we have a Supreme Court that knows that the precedent is good, but is looking for a way around what the case is really about to make it a procedural question. In fact, Gorsuch said that. Now, Sotomayor sort of dueled with him and said, so what are you really about? And she referred to Calhoun. And you may remember from your history course that Calhoun believed in the compact doctrine of our Constitution, which is to say that we made a contract in the Constitution, and any state could withdraw from that contract. Well, that's not much of a contract anyhow. But that was his theory. And that was the philosophy that led to the Civil War, among other things, obviously. But that was the procedural device. And so Gorsuch was challenged by Sotomayor as to wasn't that what he was talking about. And the significance of that is to anybody who's awake is, so you're basically becoming the Confederates. You're basically invoking law that would overturn enlightened views for the liberties and freedom of individuals. And I've thought it was very important that in the Mississippi case that the litigants spoke about how the 14th Amendment talks about liberty and that gets applied to the several states. And that liberty, and I would add the 13th Amendment, which talks about involuntary behavior or requirements. In other words, requiring a woman to carry a child to term that she didn't know was in her because at 6 weeks she didn't know, and then to force her to have that birth. Well, plainly, the poorest will suffer the most. those with access will find other states and other ways to have safe abortions, but a lot of people will be hurt. And the number of abortions in Texas has been cut in half, according to statistics reported today. So what are we dealing with? What we're dealing with is the devaluation and the end of a court as an impartial body and as a place for political transactions. If you do what I want you to do in the Supreme Court, I will appoint you to the Supreme Court. And we have at least 3 of those people, and Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett. And that is the danger here. And you don't have to take my word for it. Sotomayor, who wrote the opinion for the minority, she spoke about exactly this point, which is that if you're going to ignore precedents and you're going to make a sham out of the court when you didn't stop this when they first had a chance to stop it, meaning to suspend the new law until there had been a chance to consider it, review it, and decide what its value was and what its worth was. And to have a law that's based on a bounty by individuals who would go chase women who had an abortion after 6 weeks. What kind of person is that? So why do I think that the procedural issue Gorsuch and others are begging to use to avoid overturning a precedent? What do I think about that? I think that if a state passes a law that subverts and seeks to subvert the Constitution and prior precedent, then I think that's state action, and I think that's enough, whatever the device may mean. Because otherwise, as some members of the court, including Roberts, have said, you can take this method and outlaw any right a person has by setting up some pretext arrangement like bounty hunting, as is in Texas, to have that law be effective. Now, we continue to have Republicans across the country fighting the cure, if you will. That is, fighting the vaccine. That's outrageous. And what person with the slightest amount of empathy would ever take that position? They're afraid we will defeat, we, sensible people, Biden in particular, will defeat or limit the pandemic to such a point as that we'll just be monitoring certain kinds of vaccinations. And they think that's an issue that would hurt them. Can you think of another way to look at this? They could just be inhuman and dead stupid, but I don't think so, because they go out and they get their vaccinations, but they want others to go out and get infected, and then you'll be immune. Well, you may also be dead. So finally, last night I got a chance to talk about 2 of our stellar enemies within who would overthrow our government and make it an autocracy, a monarchy, dictatorial, whatever word you want to use. And that's Gates and Bannon. Now, if 2 people were saying something conversational like, I'd like to do A or B, you'd say, well, it doesn't mean much. But when Gates, who's an active member of the inner far-right Republican, brain trust, and Bannon, who has in fact worked in the White House and helped and worked on the insurrection that happened on January the 6th and planned beforehand with his assistance. If we can take their conversation on the air, basically seeking to get an army, and to get an army as they describe it, as 4,000 troops, like what happened in Germany when they had a paramilitary group that, among other things, discouraged people from voting. That's pretty ironic. But also, beat up those people who were dissenters, because that's what you have to do. Well, is that what they're talking about? It sure seems that way. And at one point, Bannon says on his show that, we're going to have a new government. No, it's not new. Fascist tactics have existed as long as humans could speak, and before there was recorded history. And force has been a way to compel people to do things they don't want to do that aren't in their best interest. And these 2 men and others should be called on the carpet by the FBI. And every day that the Justice Department does not have a U.S. attorney investigating this effort to overthrow our government is a day that we come closer to that fascist government. I don't know what's wrong with them. No guts, no glory. America woefully needs people to get up off the bench, get on the field, and to fight. And they're so afraid of losing their phony baloney jobs that they won't do it. There is no, I don't know, there's no safe way to show courage. You do it, and you do it at some risk. You calculate it, maybe, and you do it because it's necessary and it's right. And the few patriots in American history all did that. And this nation exists because of them. All those people who signed the Declaration of Independence, even with the reservations about women as persons, property owners being over others, slavery, they knew that they risked being hung for standing for a new nation. Well, if we want to respect what Benjamin Franklin said, if you have a republic, if you can keep it, well, we're not working at keeping it. We're apparently letting these guys run over us. And as a kid from the street, these guys would have been punched to the ground. We didn't use guns or chains or anything like that. But there were people who were bullies, and we dealt with them because the police sure as hell didn't. So anyhow, I'm now a mature, civilized adult who carefully avoids hurting his hands. So have a good evening. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.